This is where I saw the leprechaun. He told me to burn things.
There you
Another pay your dues.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Team Comp Tuesday, the series where every Tuesday we talk about a new comp, whether it be meta or a for fun team, and this team we have a spicy one for you. Originally this week it was supposed to be a Layla Sunfire Jean variant. That's actually going to be next week since we have another week before Wanderer comes out and we'll do his showcase. But inspired by one Jeff video, I decided to do a burning team because yeah, this team isn't the greatest right now, but it's funny, and I like that. And it's a little wonky and a little weird, and, you know, it's kind of fun, despite the fact that it probably uses, despite being a weird archetype, it probably uses, like, the most standard setup of characters you could humanly think of. But we're going to be going for a pure burning build today, which, yeah, it's not the best in single target, but it's alright. But it is great in AoE due to burning having some weird like AoE reactions. Let me show you. Alrighty, let's see if I can do this.
Time to work.
Suck these guys together. I think if I crap.
Give me a go.
So see, they're kind of burning each other. The damage started ticking faster and faster. I don't know if you could actually see that. It was kind of hard to tell. But it appears like burning has some weird, like, property to it where it'll burn other nearby enemies. So it's got some amount of quadratic scaling to it. No clue how much, but I just thought that was interesting and something I wanted to show off. That definitely can make this team a lot more viable in areas with lots of mobs together.
You are not welcome.
Alright, so we're going to do a quick little explanation of how burning works. I know it's a very simple reaction, but there's a pretty high chance most of you have never used this thing. So, burning is dendro on pyro. Ow. Dendro, pyro. And the damage is based off the character's elemental mastery. So see, it was 1400 there, and now it's like 1536 if Nahida is the trigger instead of Bennett, because my Bennett is not built for elemental mastery. So what this means is that you want your characters to be built with as much elemental mastery as humanly possible who are actually triggering the burn. So because the character who is the trigger needs to be built for full elemental mastery, and is actually kind of relatively inconsistent for one person over the other to be the trigger, it often means both characters have to be built mainly for elemental mastery. And you can run into problems when doing that with standard pyro units, as, well, you lose a lot of damage if you build your pyro units for full EM. So how we get around this basically is by just using a normal built pyro unit, Bennett in this case. Telma actually is a semi-decent defensive option here as well, but Bennett gives the attack buff to make everybody else do a little bit more damage. And use Anemo characters who want to build full EM anyway due to Swirl. And because there's tons of pyro on the enemies, you can apply tons of swirls as well to do even more AoE damage, which is kind of how you get one of these teams to function, is essentially using your Anemo units as the pyro triggers for the burning reaction. Alright, we're going to start by this team by talking actually about the dendro option. Sadly, of the characters we currently have, Nahida is really the only one that's pretty good. Kolei's application is a little meh, and the problem with Traveler is their consistent dendro application skill, their burst. If you hit it with fire, it blows up. So that kind of hurts their ability to consistently apply dendro to the enemy. And because of that, this really only leaves Nahida. Now, she's very good in this team, obviously, because Nahida's very good in any dendro-focused team. She's also good because she can be the on-field unit if needed. If you need some auto-attack downtimes or you just want to hit her skill again to trigger a reaction. So, that's nice. For weapons, I personally like sack frags in all my Nahida builds. Any EM substat book will work, or possibly even a DPS book, since she will be on field in this team. But personally, I like to go sack frags on her, because this is just the book I keep on her all the time. Something like Witstith is pretty good as well, actually, if you have it. If you plan to use her as on field, and especially if you have more EM artifacts, because she actually likes all three of these buffs down here, with the elemental damage and the elemental mastery ones obviously being the best. And your other option is the magic guide here. Now obviously you won't get any bonus from the effect, but it is just a 3-star weapon with an elemental mastery substat that gets pretty high. So it's alright in that regard. I would definitely use something like sack frags if you have it, or even Mappa Mare. Even though it's got a relatively low elemental mastery substat, it's at least the damage gradient here she can use. Now for artifacts, there's really only one option here. Actually, I guess in this team there isn't. In this team you could go for some other artifacts, but personally, just for generalist reasons, I personally prefer to do Deepwood Memories. Even though, yes, in this team, the actual dendro reaction you're triggering is the only dendro reaction that doesn't actually do dendro damage, I personally still would prefer to have her on Deepwood just to make her own damage higher and stuff like that. And as we said the past couple weeks for her, options are basically either EM or a standard crit rate damage style setup based on which ones you have better substats on. I personally still don't even really have an EM substat set for her, and I probably won't be getting one at this point since the new artifact set coming out. I'm going to be farming that for quite a long time, so it's probably going to be a while before I return to this domain. So I have her on a crit rate, a dendro damage goblet, and an elemental mastery sands. Now, part of the reason that you want EM on her is basically just because her skill has really good EM ratios and its damage to EM conversion here. So, because of that, she's not quite the same as most characters that want EM. Most characters that don't want EM actually don't care at all about crit and crit damage, but this actually can crit, and because of that, crit substats actually get quite a bit of value on her, so this is what makes this standard damage setup with good substats very equivalent to an EM set, even especially because I don't have an EM set with anywhere near as good substats. And for Goblet, you basically always go EM here. It just scales better than attack and is good for basically any Nahida setup. Talents, her E is her most important skill. I need more of these to level it up. But it is very insane, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, I'd probably consider getting it, even possibly crowning it, as it is her main source of damage, and as she is the main dendro unit, it's probably a very valuable skill. But honestly, whatever level you can get to is fine, but just make it your main priority. Her burst is also quite good as well, as it does increase the effectiveness of the abilities in here. So that is definitely worth also leveling up, and you can level up her normals as well, since she does normal in some teams, but I personally wouldn't invest super hard into this, especially with weekly boss mats, until you have these two leveled up. And she also offers some other nice things to this team, such as the elemental mastery bonus for other party members, or for whoever's on field. Alright, now let's talk pyro options. There's two main options that I kind of brewed or thought of. But personally, I would almost always go with Bennett because he just helps the other characters do more damage. Because much like how Nahida's skill actually can scale off attack, a lot of the other characters, despite building full EM, flat attack will increase the damage of their base skills. So it is actually not a completely wasted stat on them. It actually is pretty decent, and for that reason, especially in kind of a niche team like this that's kind of already a little bit on the weaker side, I definitely would opt to bring the Benny Boy for the power. Weapons, simple. Highest base attack weapon you have is generally the way to go. Aquila Favonius. If If you do not have this, or Skyward Blade as well, any 5-star blade that you have lying around. If you don't have a 5-star blade, the new Sumeru craftable that I keep forgetting to make, because I honestly have this, so I don't really have a huge need for it, is insanely good for him. It's got the max base attack for a sword, which is, let's see if I have one, which is this 565, and it has an elemental, an energy recharge substat here. So very, very, very good. Definitely worth building. If you don't have that and don't want to build it or don't have access to it, any energy recharge sword probably after that would be my honest suggestion. Festering Desire, if you have it, is a pretty good one just from a long time ago, just because it's got a decent base attack to energy recharge and it's not all the way as low as something like Fav Sword. But to be completely honest, swords like this work as well. I really wouldn't use a 3-star sword, just because, yeah, that base attack is basically the most important thing for him. For artifacts, the only real way to go is Noblesse. You actually probably could go for something like Instructor here, but he wouldn't be the one triggering the effect, so maybe that would be hard. Maybe actually in this team, there is an argument to maybe run him on a different set, but you're going to be running him on Noblesse all the time for every other team in existence, so to make it simple, Noblesse. Sans, energy recharge, 100%. For substats, you're also looking for as much energy recharge as humanly possible. For Goblet, I prefer to build my Bennett's for damage just to eke out a little bit more damage from my teams. You don't have to. You can go HP, but I prefer to go Pyro damage and crit rate. Another advantage of going something like crit rate is if I were to run him on a Fav Sword, this would increase the likelihood of him chucking the particles out, so that is something to keep in mind. For talents, most important one is his ult, as this is basically his entire kit. His E is, you can level it up as well because you might use it in some other teams, but ult is the main one we care about. Now, personally, I've looked at this, and I don't actually think this is worth crowning. I've done the math, and it actually isn't that big of an attack bonus, like 7%. And like he currently gives, I don't know, maybe you're somewhere in the realm of 1,000-ish, so he probably only gets like an extra 70. It's not bad, but especially if you don't have a lot of crowns, I personally wouldn't recommend crowning Bennett Burst. You're better off crowning the skill you're trying to apply the Bennett Burst to than you are to crown the Bennett Burst. That's just a side note I want to talk about real quick. And obviously, don't recommend putting his C6 on, even if you have it. It's not bad, and honestly, it doesn't mess with that many characters anymore, but you can't go back, so I'm personally not going to do it. Alright, and next up here, we'll be talking about the Anemo characters in this team. Again, the reason we use Anemo characters is due to them having very high elemental mastery, meaning they'll get a lot out of the burning damage, and they want to build elemental mastery anyway, as well as grouping being very, very good, as if the enemies are close enough, it seems to be that the ticks actually will apply to each other, making it do a lot more damage. So for that reason, we have double Anemo units in this team. Kazuha and Venti are the two I would heavily recommend. You could use someone like Sucrose, but she will do significantly less personal DPS, and these characters' personal DPS is actually irrelevant to this team. So, especially being a weaker power level team, you know, you kind of need all that you get. So, I would personally recommend just sticking to these two. Weapons for Kazuha, Iron Sting actually wins out in this team. Most of the time, Favonius is just strictly better on him, as being able to burst every rotation is insanely valuable, and most people aren't going to have good enough substats. You need something like 70-80% ER from substats in order to be able to run an Iron Sting and still be able to ult every rotation. But since we have Venti in this team, this means we have more Anemo particles coming in, which means we can opt to run him on an Iron Sting. Likewise, any EM Sword, obviously his signature Freedom Soren is fine. Favonius and Sacrificial are actually still good on this team as they can help funnel Venti. You could actually unironically use his sword from his story if you wanted to for fun in this team. I mean, be my guest, because you do actually use his base damage a little bit. He isn't just here to be an EM buffer, but that's kind of up to you. Artifacts, I'm still going to run VV on both my guys since both of them are going to be spamming swirls, and the increased swirl damage is very relevant, especially because we're still built for full elemental mastery. Still looking for as much elemental mastery from stud substats as you can get, and as much energy recharge as humanly possible. Triple EM on the artifacts is still the way to go. For talents, for Kazuha, if you actually want his E skill to do damage, you actually have to level his normal attack, because the plunge he uses in his E takes his normal attack multiplier. But if you just want to be as low investment as possible, despite the fact you still have to get him to 90 because he's an emo unit, so you're going to have to invest into him anyway. But if you want to be low investment post that, his burst is where most of his damage is locked, and that is locked in, and that's why you need some amount of elemental mastery, or sorry, not much mastery, energy recharge on him, and why bursting every rotation is often really good, because this does quite a bit of damage, especially because it hits a ton of times. And yeah, that's Kazuha. Alright, next up is the young bard, Venti himself. Now, one of the reasons why we use Venti is because of his insane grouping. Kazuha and Venti do actually have pretty good synergy together, as Kazuha's ult generally pushes units away, which prevents him from, like, eating them back together and getting as much swirl damage as humanly possible, because if you don't know, swirl actually does damage around itself to nearby enemies. So if you swirl two enemies, they will actually do their swirl damage to each other. They'll get hit both times. So blowing the enemies away with Kazuha ult and then trying to suck them back in, well, there's a chance that they don't take the swirl damage from each other. So Venti actually does have good synergy with Kazuha, pulling people together and helping keeping them in place. And just like him, he can run full elemental mastery, no problemo. Weapons here, stringless, the way to go, in my opinion. The Viridescent, or not Viridescent, sorry. His signature, I don't know why I'm blanking on the name right now, but the freaking best bow in the game, the support bow. Why am I blanking on the name right now? But that bow is also quite good. Any elemental mastery substat bow is good, but stringless is probably your way to go. If you don't have stringless, you probably have to use something like Favonius Warbow, unless I'm pretty sure the Sumeru Craftal's energy recharge substat, so you probably would have to use something like Favonius. Elegy, that's the bow I'm talking about. If you have Elegy, you can use Elegy. If not, I'd recommend Stringless. Windbloom Oath, if you have it from the event back in the day, not a bad option either. Artifacts, same as Kazuha, 4 Viridescent Venerer, way to go. Very similar logic as well, where as much energy recharge as you can get on top of as much elemental mastery as you can get in substats. As you can see, my Ventis does not necessarily have the most elemental mastery in the substats of his. This is pretty good though. Pieces. But if you can get it, definitely get it. And for talents, E and Ultimate, they both do relatively decent damage, so they are both worth leveling up. Alright, and now we're going to go on to the sample rotation. This showcase is going to be a little weird because this is primarily a team that's really very good in AoE and not really in single target, so this might not look as good as the team has in the previous stuff. But the general idea with this team is very simple. You just want to apply Pyro, apply Dendro, and then spam your skills and bursts off cooldown, basically. Is a very simple concept for a team. Ideally, you use all of your stuff inside of Bennett Burst for the damage amp. So we lay down the Bennett skill, lay down Nahita's thing, we're building up the Bennett Burst, Venti ult, Kazuha E, Kazuha R. You can use Venti's E off cooldown just for energy. Spam something. Ideally, you do not want to go back to Bennett and reapply a lot of your stuff due to him then taking ownership of the burning and it being lower, but as long as you make sure you're using a swirl on a character who actually does a lot more damage afterwards, it's okay. You just want to, if you're going to, as you use your E's on Bennett to fill your energy, you just want to make sure that you're swapping back to either an Anemo or a Nahida Auto, just to make sure that the ownership goes back to somebody who has a lot of elemental mastery. And you can kind of spam skills to fill downtime, spam Nahida autos to fill downtime. Ideally, you don't want to be spamming Bennett E's like I was saying, but you still can. This team is not really set in stone. It's not a super... It's not an insane meta team, but that certainly wasn't a super bad clear time. So, this is totally a fun team if you want to put it together and use it. And it uses units you probably already have built, and it doesn't even use any kind of weird setups on them. So you probably literally have this team built already if you've been playing a long time. And you can just kind of chuck it together. This is my new favorite background in the game. But I want to thank you all for watching. This week was a bit of a fun team, very much inspired by a video made by Jeff, a very good theory crafter. Definitely go watch his content if you haven't seen it and you like learning about Genshin. He's a fun guy and he makes really good content. But there are other variations of this team that maybe we'll eventually cover, and especially that he covered in his thing, but I want to do a pure burning team. You definitely can do stuff like just add burning to your superconduct teams to get a little bit more damage, or add burning to a like a melt Ganyu setup. Or put a Electro unit on this team actually and trigger overloads while triggering your burnings. But I wanted to go with the pure setup. I like running the double Anemo core. There aren't many teams where you get to play Venti Kazuha together, and I very much, as an Anemo main, I love me some excuses to use a Venti Kazuha setup. So that's why I decided to do this version of the team for Team Comp Tuesday. Next week teams is probably going to be a Layla Jean Sunfire team, I believe is what I'm working on. Originally that was going to be this week's team, but I need a little bit longer to kind of build it out and mess around with it. So that's going to be next week's video. And then the week after that, we have Scaramouche coming out, which he is a fast attacking hyper carry, so he is basically my ideal character, so I am 100% rolling him, even if for nothing else to try to get... the 4-star to make my Zhao teams better. But that's either here nor there. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had fun. And I hope you, you give this team a try. Even if you don't have some of these units, you definitely can make substitutions. Venti, if you don't have Venti or Kazuha, Sucrose is an okay substitution. Nahida is kind of a hard requirement since she does so much more than the other Dendro options, but you could always mess around. Just have fun with it. But I want to thank you for coming out. I wish you luck if you're wishing on anybody this week, and I hope you have a great day.